Bum bum bottom 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 bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 doobie doobie da 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 bum bum bottom bum bum bottom ba da da 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 ba da da.
You are now in session with the Comic Book Couples Counseling Podcast. I'm Lisa Gullickson.
And I'm Brad Gullickson.
And each month we evaluate a different iconic romance within the four-color realm. And in this episode, what's a comics bookcase? Maybe like a bookcase, but for comics? Isn't that just a regular bookcase? Who cares? This storm is ruining our camping. Let's go into our creator corner. We're talking to comics creator Zack Quaintance about his new anthology, The Death of Comics Bookcase, Volume 1, currently on Kickstarter.
Yeah, Lisa, how was your weekend?
It was very, very busy, and I read no comics, and it made me sad. How was your weekend?
My weekend was great.
How dare you?
I did actually read some comics, but more importantly, I bought a whole lot more comics.
Some of them better be for me.
Some of them were for you.
Yay.
I actually scored a ton of teen romance comics at WonderCon this past weekend.
I know, and the prices were insane.
Yeah.
They were like $4, $5, $6.
Yeah.
On the East Coast, that's unimaginable.
Like, WonderCon is such a strange convention for purchasing books because there are so many dealers, which is wonderful, but the price ranges amongst those dealers is extremely varied. You can find, like, let's say Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles #6 going for as high as $80 and as low as $15.
Yeah, that's wild.
And it is the convention, and by the way, I bought it for $15. and it is a convention where the dealers are more than willing to haggle with you. My first big purchase at WonderCon this year was the Mirage era micro series Raphael first print. We're big Turtles fans, right?
We are.
But we don't really like to spend a lot of money. Like spending more than $50 on a comic is rare for the Gullicksons. And spending more than $100 is extremely rare. Spending $200, I mean, it's been decades since we've done that, right? But that book tends to go for $200 and up. So I was going around the convention looking, at this and that, looking at all the turtle books. Trolling for turtles and usagis and some noms. Thank you, Daniel Warren Johnson, for that new obsession. And I kept seeing it for like $200. And I went to this one guy and, I saw it there and he saw me looking at it and he goes like, "Oh, you're interested in the Raphael?" And I was like, "I am." "Is that $200? He goes like, "Yeah, it's $200, but I'm willing to haggle." And I was like, "Oh, yeah?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, how about $150?" And he goes, "How about $160?" And I was like, "Done."
Oh, yeah.
So I'm extremely excited that we finally got to add that book to the Comic Book Couples Counseling collection. And now that I have that book, it's like, do we go for it? Right? Like, do we go for Ninja Turtles 1 first printing? Can we scrounge like $25,000 for a comic, Lisa? Lisa, how many funerals is that? How many funerals do you have to sing to get a $25,000 comic?
I don't know
it's
math.
It's a lot.
The math should be easy. Pause it so people don't listen to me math.
There you go. We've paused.
It's 100.
Yeah, 100 funerals.
100 people would have to die for us to buy that comic.
I don't know. Something to think about.
The thing is, I have the arrogance to think that our copy is out there at like...
half that?
Yeah, it's just like, I believe every issue we want is in the universe at the price that we want to buy it at, and all we have to do is just keep shopping.
The reality is we don't need a first print. And we do have a reprint already of Ninja Turtles 1, and I'm perfectly satisfied with that. We got one of those like IDW Free Comic Book Day versions of it. And,
we have the working principle that if we can read the story otherwise, if the story exists at a reasonable price, we don't need the original comic, but I can feel that principle kind of crumbling before our eyes as we get these issues that our hearts desire.
You know, something happened in this last year where I finally committed to, collecting Ninja Turtles comics, and I've been having a lot of fun going through the bins trying to find it. But, WonderCon is a lot more than just bin diving. It is like the most relaxed comic convention that we attend. And this year, like last year, I bunked with a couple of buddies, Jeremy from the Geekly Grind and Lance from Comic Book Keepers. They got the beds, I got the floor.
Why do you do that?
Perfectly satisfied. I do it because it's cheap. I take red-eye flights, I take connections, I take floors. I want to make, when we're not traveling together, I want to make the trip as cheap as possible.
I feel like it's
so
like
I can take that savings and put it into acquiring a microseries Raphael.
I feel like it's like some kind of weird masculine monk-like stoicism.
I don't
know
you
go like, I'm woman free. I can do things the hardest way possible.
I mean, it might be tied to my male ego for sure. I won't deny that. And so, we're all bunking together. Every morning, we woke up, we podcast about how the day went. So if you're looking for, a really detailed discussion on this year's WonderCon, see the link in the show notes and listen to those 3 conversations. We had a ton of fun. Just a couple other highlights. We got to meet up with a few past Comic Book Couples Counseling guests. Patrick Horvath was there.
Yay!
Finally got to meet him in person. And
jealous.
Yeah, I make Lisa jealous. But he was wondering where you were, and he missed you. And we're going to see him in Chicago,
Yay.
Lisa. Saw Sarah Meyer and Eric Burnham, talked a lot about how much we're loving Saturday Morning Adventures, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I finally got to meet Michael Schwartz. He has a new comic book coming out called Armored. Mm-hmm. And, I read it on the plane on the way back, and I thought it was freaking delightful. It's coming from Clover Press. They're doing a campaign on that, so be on the lookout. It is about an orphan who moves in with his foster parents, and his foster parents have recently lost their child about the same age, and they live in England, and they're near a castle, and that castle is haunted, and he discovers a suit of armor that is haunted by a ghost, and when he puts it on, him and the ghost now have adventures.
That's so fun.
And the artist is Ismael Hernandez, and they have this really rich, watercolory, cartoony style that reminded me a little bit of Tyler Crook.
Okay.
And, Michael Schwartz has gotten some really rad variant covers for the book. Folks like Jay Lee and Nick Patera, and I'm excited to see people check this out. But honestly, the big highlight for WonderCon for me is that our friend Eamon Winkle is now officially a pro comic book artist.
Yay!
And this was his first con going as a pro. He is the artist behind the new series, The Principles of Necromancy, from writers Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing, also former
friends
guests,
of the pod.
Right? And it's coming from Magma Comics, a new publisher. And man, Eamon Winkle, we knew this. We met Eamon through Jesse Tapia. And Jesse was always the biggest champion of artists. And he knew everybody. And he was always discovering rad talent. And he introduced us to Eamon. And when we saw Eamon's work, we were like, oh, okay, so
we're in.
This guy's going to blow up,
yeah.
Right? And so this is his first issue. This is our chance and your chance listening to get on the ground floor of a talent that I think is going to be a pretty big deal in the next coming years. The Principles of Necromancy #1 hits comic book shops today, Wednesday. So ask your dealer about it, flip through it, see the final 2 splash pages of this issue, and tell me this dude's not going to be major. I dare you.
Yeah.
And so getting to watch him have his first signing, he was doing his first interviews, he did his first panel. I got to watch him meet Derek Robertson, who did a variant cover for his book. And like, you know, they met, they were on the panel together, they shook hands like, oh, nice to meet you. And then I got to see Derek Robertson realize that, oh, this is Eamon Winkle, the artist. And then Derek Robertson like lit up.
Yay.
And then Eamon lit up. So it was like a really special moment. And like that was worth the flight alone to see it happen. And yeah, you know, like, you know, I attended the Gail Simone panel where she revealed all kinds of crazy stuff. Is Gail doing a Superman comic? Sure looks like it. She's relaunching Misty from Rebellion. She's, of course, doing Uncanny X-Men. They showed at least one interior page from David Marquez. And Gail and her husband Skott did the panel together.
I think that's so fun. I'm so sad I missed it.
I am so eager to get them on the podcast. I would love to have Skott and Gail on as guests and do a proper counseling session with
Love
them.
Seat Edition.
Yeah, a Love Seat Edition. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, just had an absolute ball at WonderCon. My highest recommendations for that convention. You know, it fell on Easter weekend. It was raining. The guests, I think, didn't show up because of being on Easter weekend, so it wasn't as stacked as it has been in previous years. But I had just as much fun, and I certainly spent as much on comics as I ever have done before. So yeah, it was a total victory from my point of view. And I came away from the event really inspired. And we've talked about this in the past. You know, conventions have the ability to rejuvenate you, as do our conversations with comic book creators. And our chat here with Zack Quaintance was a rejuvenating chat, was an inspiring chat. It will make you want to make comics.
I've been a huge fan of Zack Quaintance for a long time because I followed his blog, The Comics Bookcase, when he said, oh, I want to open up the page and invite more writers to contribute. I was like, please let me do this. And I was so shocked and honored when he was like, yeah, sure, of course, write me some stuff. And so I started comics writing there, and he was so super supportive because the way, just like the way I podcast, the way I write about comics is very individualistic. I'm very like hyper focused on myself, and he made me being myself on Comics Bookcase kind of okay. I did not have to feel like a critic. I just had to feel like a fan who wanted to write about comics. And so he let me have my first column, which was YA free period.
I miss it, Lisa.
I do too. And I only did like 3 articles before he was like, okay, and now Comics Bookcase is going to start the process of going away.
Not just going away, dying.
Dying.
He's killing Comics Bookcase with this project, the Death of Comics Bookcase.
And though my heart is a little broken and we do some gotcha journalism and we tell him how sad I was, I am so intensely excited and proud for Zack because he actually started sending me pages before a lot of people, I think. And I was like, damn it. He is so good.
Yeah. He's so good, and he's like assembled such an awesome crew of artists to help him kill Comics Bookcase.
Which makes sense because he is a man of very good taste.
And what this comic is an anthology that samples various genres. You know, there's a superhero story, there's a werewolf story, there's a Tales from the Crypt kind of story, there's science fiction, and we've got cats like Nick Cagnetti and PJ Holden making it all happen with him. But mostly, and this was the great surprise of reading The Death of Comics Bookcase, is that it's a comic book about Zack. This is a biographical book.
Not like literally, but emotionally.
Yeah, but you know, like there's just a lot more of Zack than I was expecting. And because there's so much Zack in this, and this is him processing the shuttering of the Comics Bookcase website and the rebranding of what he wants to do with it now, or what he wants to do with himself as a comics creator, like this is a transitional moment, I think it becomes extremely universal. You know, through that specificity, you can find yourself. The reader can find themselves.
The way the book works is it's presented like a Tales from the Crypt style anthology where there is this framing narrative that these 4 kids go to a weird house to get out of the rain. And there's this weird comics bookcase character that's just wanting to tell them stories. But there's one scene that my brain keeps going back to, and it's the scene where the kids are running down this hallway, and there are all of these doors of past versions of Zack, where the doors are closed, and he's like, I'm no longer this anymore. And the examples are like, you know, comics blogger, respected journalist,
TikToker.
And then there's the one door that's open, and the door that's open is comic book creator. And like, it makes me think about my own past and the doors that I've closed, where it's just like, you know, opera singer. Well, first it would go like musical theater. That was my dream job as a kid. Then I went to college. Opera singer is now closed. And then, you know, maybe novelist. Novelist is closed. Maybe novelist is open. We don't know. But like, to me, that part of the book, I was like, that is raw. That is very vulnerable to say, like, here are the childhood dreams, or here are the like concepts of myself that I've let go of. Like, it's
that I've shut the door on.
It's like such like a, it's hard to admit and mourn when a dream dies.
Yeah, well, what I'll say though, Lisa, is those doors are on hinges and doors can be reopened.
Of course. But I mean, like, but the emotional thing of saying, I've given up on this.
Yeah, so it's like, it's a very sweet and clever comic filled with so much Zack, filled with so much humanity, but again, also told by these incredible artists as well. You can check out the Kickstarter campaign right now. There is also one of those links in the show notes. Please do so. Look at the sample pages and consider backing this book. And also, you know, you're going to hear this conversation, and I find it weird that you would listen through this entire conversation and not want to partake in Zack Quaintance's journey. But before we get to Zack, Lisa, we have to do a little something called
Referrals.
Sponsored by Omnibus. Omnibus is a modern digital comic book store and reader app carrying your favorite single issues, volumes, and omnibuses all day and date. Just like your local comic book store, you pay per book, but digital.
Their focus is on building an excellent customer shopping and reading experience and using novel discovery features to help fans find their next new favorite book. They feature top-tier content and already have many of the top publishers in comics today.
In the spirit of helping people find their next new favorite book, we have our referrals segment. The idea is to give our counselees, that's you guys, further reading on the themes of the episode. Think of it as us sending you to specialists to further your healing journey through comic books. Lisa, when I was at WonderCon this past weekend, I went and had dinner with our buddy Eric and also his son Ben and his friend other Ben. And we were talking about our referral segments on our episodes. And he goes, do you just use the same audio clip every time as you introduce the referral segment? Or does Lisa always sing referrals?
I sing it every single time. And I'm never happy with it. That's the truth. I sing it every single time. Today, my voice is still tired from singing all weekend, and I don't like that. I wish I had one clip of me singing it perfectly, but it has not happened.
We have used a double once.
Really?
So there is one episode where some audio got corrupted, and then I had to clip audio from a previous episode into that episode, but that was weeks ago.
That's so funny.
And you didn't even know about it.
I didn't.
But here, we got to talk about our referrals. Lisa, I went first last time, and I'm very curious to hear what comic book you are recommending to pair with the Death of Comics Bookcase.
I feel like I went a little bit obvious, but I think to some people it might not be obvious that this thing is still happening and rad creators are still contributing to it. And it is Creepshow.
Yeah.
And there are single issues of Creepshow. There are 2 volumes of Creepshow available on Omnibus right now.
Yeah.
And they contain friends of the pod, like previously mentioned Eric Burnham, as well as Kyle Starks, Alyssa Whitney, Clay McLeod Chapman, all kinds of cool people are participating in this super fun pulpy tradition of Creepshow.
One of my favorite Creepshow issues from the recent run is the Joe Hill issue.
Yeah.
It's so fun to see Stephen King's son doing the Stephen King thing with Creepshow, right? So yeah, this is a great pick.
Thank you. I'm a little embarrassed, but I felt like it had to happen.
No. I like, to me, yeah, no.
Becky Cloonan.
No notes. A ton of people have contributed to the new Creepshow, and it is an absolute blast. Love seeing it in our pull box every month. For my recommendation, I am going to go a little bit of a different route, but maybe just as obvious. I wanted to zero in on the biography angle, and this one is not autobiographical, but in telling Charles Schulz's story, I think they're also telling the story of a lot of cartoonists, right? And this book comes from Top Shelf. It's Funny Things, a comic strip biography of Charles M. Schulz by Francesco Matteucci and Luca Debu. And man, this is a great read. It's telling the story of Charles Schulz in the format that he is most known for, the comic strip. And, it's cartooned a little bit to mimic his style as well. But Debu is very much his own cartoonist. And, somebody that we met last year at New York Comic Con while we were browsing through Artist Alley. They too were also, looking at all the amazing artists that were present. And
hanging with Kevin Alvier, whom we love.
That's right. And that conversation was like just one of those conversations where we were having such a great time talking about comics, and then you discovered like that person is also a comic book artist, and you're like, oh, well, I got to go check out their book. And then I discovered that I had their book already.
And they're freaking brilliant.
They're freaking brilliant. Yeah, it's a fat boy, so it's going to take you a little bit of time to read it, but it is well worth it. And like I said, you'll get a better understanding of Charles Schulz, but you also get a better understanding of these two cartoonists and the art form itself. And I feel like you get that with the Death of Comics bookcase as well.
Yeah, great pick. We nailed it. And Omnibus right now is finally available on your iPhone. You can download the app, or you can just hit up your browser. If you don't have an iPhone, you can just click the link in the show notes, go to their shop, and start browsing today. This is not a subscription. This is a comic book store. It's just online. And the Android beta is in process right now, so that will be available real darn soon, too. Let's hear a fresh one, Lisa. Bring it. Referrals. No, it sounds terrible. It sounds real bad.
You sound lovely. So on that note, friends, let's get to our conversation with Zack Quaintance.
Ooh, a pun.
Zack, welcome to Comic Book Couples Counseling. Hello.
Hey, very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm going to do a hardball first question. Here we go. As a person who has interviewed so many comic book creators, and now you're being interviewed as a comic book creator, is that weird for you? Or is this the part where you're like, I'm super prepared for this thing?
It's kind of weird. Like, there's a totally different mindset you have to get past, because like when you're interviewing someone, you don't want to put yourself into it too much. You kind of want to get out of the way. And then when you're being interviewed, I feel like, it's incumbent on me to put myself into this as much as I can and be like more of myself than usual. So there's like, I guess, a little bit of a shift to normally how I would be participating in this conversation.
But I feel like you've been working on that shift for quite a while. You've done a great job of preparing the public for your comics work.
Yeah, it's been gradual. Like, it kind of like, so like I can trace it back to like June 2022, actually, when I sort of stepped away from doing Comics Bookcase as the blog, and took some time off of just like not tweeting obsessively every day and like being out there so much on social media to like kind of do a little bit of personal inventory and figure out, do I want to continue focusing more on media, or like, do I want to go after this thing that I've had in the back of my head for years now where I actually want to try to create. So yeah, there was kind of like I went away for a little bit, and then I was like cryptically tweeting like Death of Comics Bookcase is coming, and like I'm working on comics, and like just putting that out there every few months to remind people who used to follow me on social media that yeah, I still exist. I'm still a person in comics.
Yeah, as like fans of Comics Bookcase, the original iteration, and as people who have also periodically written for that site, participated for that site, like we had like real mixed emotions.
Sad, but that's okay. I
Well,
forgive
yeah.
you.
Thank you. Yeah, because Lisa, I mean, you were one of the, I'd say, foundational writers
Aw.
for the site. Like the YA stuff you did and some of the other writing was like really important to the site. And honestly, that was the hardest part of making this transition was I was working with so many great people on it. And I tried to, when I did that, kind of give them all the path to like, hey, do you want to write for Comics Beat? Because I still kind of do that a little bit. And to like, make it a little less painful to stop knowing everyone that I've been working with every day.
Yeah, but like, we know firsthand that, putting something out into the universe requires a lot of effort, a lot of time, and there is very little, if any, financial reward back. So the energy that you're putting out into the universe is done exclusively through your own passion. And I'm curious about the math of that. Were you considering the math of that when you were going like, I've been doing this thing, Comics Bookcase, but I love comics so much, I kind of want to contribute to the medium as well. So if I'm going to devote that time, I want to devote it into this other arena involving comics.
Yeah. So a couple things, like actually, you talk about how small the financial reward is. I was actively losing money on Comics Bookcase
Yes,
because
yes.
I was paying for the Squarespace site, I was paying for the domain name, I was paying for the email and newsletter, and I was getting like a little bit back from Comixology's affiliate program. And when Comixology went down, it just became this like ridiculous loss of money and it tapered it. So yeah, but in like with balancing that, like I have a background in writing literary short stories. Like in my 20s, I was like really active in literary circles. Like I had 4 or 5 short stories published. I went to the Tin House Writers Workshop, so I had like a background in creative writing. And as I got a little bit older, like I started to get more and more into comics. Like it was just a nice escape, and the medium just spoke to me a little more clearly than kind of the stuffier literary circles can be a little stuffier, and I was kind of drawn more to this. And so like when I started the blog, part of it was like I did have from the very beginning this idea that I wanted to be a creator within comics, but I felt like I didn't really know the industry well, know the people within it that well, or like what the process was like for growing as a comic book writer. And at the same time, there's this idea that I heard about at a writer's workshop where part of being a writer is creating, and another part they would say is being a good literary citizen. So that would be things like writing book reviews, telling your friends about great books. So when I showed up in comics to take it more seriously, I thought of it like, I want to be a good comic citizen. Like I want to contribute to the industry instead of just showing up and being like, I'm here, read what I'm working on, work with me as a collaborator. Like, so I wanted to kind of build a foundation that way with the site, with no plan. So I was just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. Like, I'm just going to see where this takes me. But yeah, I did always have that idea that I wanted to be a creator in the back of my head from the start of it.
Having gotten to read this first work of yours, which is The Death of Comic Bookcase, like I was actually surprised with how vulnerable you were in that book, especially with the interstitials and going like, hey, this is my open door, and I have been actively closing doors to get to this place. Was this an exorcism of sorts?
Yeah, so you all are the first ones who aren't like related to me or part of my family in some way to read this and discuss the book with me like live. So like I'm really excited to talk about this. But yeah, there was an exorcism is probably the great I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's such a great way to describe it. Like those interstitials are definitely like me putting all the like all the time and energy and like honestly frustrations I had with doing that to rest, and like just being self-deprecating about it. Like, hey, I was out here presenting myself as this comics bookcase was like a personality I had essentially online. And so like there is an element of like killing it involved in this book, like both literally and sort of metaphorically.
When we were reading the comic, we were surprised at how personal the anthology is. I mean, obviously it's called the Death of Comics Bookcase,
And you are comics.
and you are Comics
Right.
Bookcase. So we were anticipating some personal connection there, but throughout the stories, there's so much Zack in this book.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I felt like I got really honest, maybe too honest at at some parts in this book. But yeah, there's like this is me, and I've said that as I've sort of started marketing this. Like, if you've liked my sensibilities at any point on social media as an editor of comics blogs, like I'm all over this book, like for better or worse. Like, uh, it's like strange. Like I feel like there's a story about apes fighting sharks in this book, which is maybe the most honest, painful thing I've written. Like,
Illustrated by PJ Holden.
yeah, yeah.
What a get.
I know. I'm still pinching myself about that one. And then actually, like, if PJ, as we were working on that, like the book has a cover by John McCrea, with colors by Mike Spicer, and that wouldn't have happened without PJ. Like, PJ kind of connected us on that. Working with both of them, by the way, is like a dream come true. Like, I've been reading John McCrea comics, I don't know, 20 years now, and PJ a little more came to his work a little more recently. But I think they're both sort of like legends, and
Yeah.
what an honor to work with them. But yeah, the stories are very personal. Like, Werewolf Priest, which is the kind of the first one after the interstitials, is actually like it's based on my experience as a young reporter in my early 20s, like in South Texas, and I just kind of added very pulpy, ridiculous horror all throughout, like those memories.
And I think what's so exciting about the anthology is that even though there's so much Zack in the book, and if you know Zack in any way, you'll recognize all that. I think there's enough there that any comic book aficionado will connect pretty severely to it. Like,
Who wants to make a thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We all have that. Like, sometimes it does feel like my life is actually just a series of thinly veiled exit strategies from my present. You know what I mean? Like, to me, the hallway of closed doors was like extremely relatable.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was so yeah, like what we're talking about is during the interstitial, like the concept of the interstitials is there's these kids, like they're drawn right out of 80s teen movies. Like, I think the note describing one of them was like, actually is Molly Ringwald. So like, so they're on a camping trip, it starts to rain, they go into this creepy old house, and there's this comics bookcase there, like a big mutant comics bookcase, drawn by Ryan Lee with colors by Doug Garbark. And I think, and the note for the comics bookcase was, I sent him a photo of the anthropomorphic chair from Pee Wee's Playhouse.
Yeah.
And I was like this,
sense.
but sadder was like the note I gave him. So the comics bookcase wants to tell the kids these stories, and they're just like horrified because like this thing is objectively terrifying. And as they're running away, they run through this hallway of like very self-deprecating closed doors that the comics bookcase is closed, and it's like respected journalist, comics blogger, and these are all things that I had like entertained, being like, maybe I could try my hand at this. And so like that's the that joke is very much like born from like pain I had struggling with, is this like the right way to spend my energy? Like, all those doors kind of represent something I'd like really thought about and like considered trying my hand at legitimately.
I think it's interesting that you went the spoof route with this first book, because spoof and satire does require a lot of fluency in the genre, but it is also actively criticizing the medium. So like, what inspired you to go like, okay, this thing that I love, that I've dedicated my life to, that's comics, and the thing that I want to make, I'm going to tear it a new one?
Yeah, I've actually been, because like I did an email interview too where like specifically the story I did with Nick Cagnetti, the
Yeah.
Responsibili-Teen, like someone described it as taking the piss, and I was just like, oh, I didn't actively think of it that way. I think, I think what happened here with a lot of like, and the stories are sort of antagonistic towards comics, like to varying degrees. I think part of this is like the thing I've done for 6 years now that I continue to do for the beat is this top comics to buy list where I used to read 30 new comics a week off of publishers like what's coming previews and like pick my 5 favorites. I've since reduced that to 20 for my own well-being. But I think so I think some of the parody just comes from like having read the sheer volume of brand new comics I've read over the last 6 years since I started doing the blog.
Mm-hmm.
Like after a while, like you just want to like make jokes a little bit, like for your own sanity, you know. It's like,
But what I was thinking about when reading, actually, that story in particular was a conversation that we had with Jordan Bloom and Patton Oswalt about minor threats, and how when you're telling stories that are about comics and that sometimes will also, speak to the more negative aspects of comics and comics creating, you need to tell it from a place of love, and you can feel that love in minor threats, and you can absolutely feel that in the Death of Comics bookcase too. And I think that's what rescues it from being, a bummer. Like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
the opposite of a bummer.
Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, I like obviously I really really love comics. Like I've just spent so much time, energy, and money on this medium. And to be honest, like that story in particular, like had come from like where it starts to get a little like poke funny is because I was trying to create a new superhero and just failing at it massively.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just couldn't do it. So it was more like I started everything, all my ideas started to feel like retreads as I was trying to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was more like, I guess it can come off as like poking fun at superheroes generally, but it started from a place of poking fun at myself for having an utter inability to add anything to the superhero genre. Like, um, yeah, like I love comics, and I was also kind of like uh coming clean with like I don't think I can do a new superhero, and then a new superhero kind of came out of that, like from that
Yeah.
admission.
But I would totally read that comic if it was not written by AI. I would totally read this Responsibility-Teen comic.
Well, if you know anything about Nick Cagnetti as
Oh
well,
yeah.
he's a huge Spider-Man fan and a Ditko maniac. And so to see that first page, which is such an obvious reference to Amazing Fantasy 15, like it's a delight. The Death of Comics bookcase throughout still hits that like you still get that dopamine rush of like, oh, comic book references of like, oh, we're still in a club. We're all reading this together.
Mhm.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, like I didn't want it to feel too insular. Like I wanted it all to stand, so if you don't get those references, you can enjoy it just as well. But yeah, there's a lot of winks to people who are like us, obsessives with the medium. It's like there's kind of uh like there's a lot of Easter eggs throughout. And I even thought like the comics bookcase framing sequence is like, if you know like sort of the tradition of horror hosts in comics, like that should be a lot of fun for you to
Yeah.
kind of see one done differently with a little like, bad things happen to that bookcase.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about Tales from the Crypt and EC Comics because of the announcement of the partnership with Oni Press, and like just reading those interstitial bits, I found extremely comforting. But again, the surprise being how personal they are as well.
Yeah, and it gets dark. Like it's called Death of Comics Bookcase. Like something bad's gonna happen. But I should say, like, if this Kickstarter is a roaring success, I mean, the follow-up would be, and this is also very winky towards comic book fans, it would be Death of Comics Bookcase Volume 2, Reign of the Comics Bookcases. So so like we haven't seen the end of the comics bookcase necessarily. Like that there'd be another set of interstitials that would like continue, would actually like revisit where the kids are at several years experiencing guilt over what happens to the bookcase.
I look forward to the Cyborg comics bookcase and the Eradicator comics bookcase coming back.
Yeah, yeah, no, and Bookcase of Steel. Like I've thought about all of it and talked to Ryan Lee about this. So fingers
Amazing.
crossed this will happen.
I'm curious about the process of writing and figuring out the stories that you did want to tell. You know, you've mentioned a little bit about the Werewolf Priest and Responsibili-Teen and, you know, the apes versus sharks and the Omega Brain. You know, I imagine these are all ideas that are like flittering through your head, but how did they end up becoming the stories for this anthology?
Yeah, so it started with actually Werewolf Priest and the fantasy story Gold Mask were actually pitches, were developed as proof of concept and pitches for longer series. Werewolf Priest in particular, I've done like a whole outline and development process for like a 5-issue mini series. And so I was working on that, but I was like, you know, nobody knows me as a comics writer. I knew it would be and the industry's not in the greatest place for like pitching to established small press publishers right now. So like as I was working on those two as pitches, I started thinking like, I don't want these to be these pitches you hear about where like you see a page or two here or there and no one's ever seen them. Like I really enjoy Anna Redman's work. I think she's an incredible rising talent in comics. And so I didn't want to like work on these stories with Anna Redman and Luke Horsman, who drew Gold Mask, and just have them go nowhere. Like even if the pitch didn't go anywhere. So I started to think of it as like, I need a backup plan to get this work out there. While I'm pitching, like I'm still going to actively pitch those, but so the anthology idea started to take hold from there. And around the same time, I think last February, I interviewed Nick Cagnetti and got really into Pink Lemonade and like did a deep dive on it. And so I wanted to write a superhero story specifically for him. And at that point, I already had 3 stories, and then the I wanted to tie them together. Like I think I wanted to do an anthology with the framing sequence. Like I didn't just want to be like, here's a book cut into 3 10-page parts. So the frame started to happen. And then I had 8 pages for that and needed 2 other stories to go in it. So I did a little more next door, and then I wasn't going to make a comic of this scale that did not have apes in it. That's how that one found its way in.
That's you know, an element that I want to talk about here is, you know, okay, you've interviewed Nick Cagnetti. Boy, it would be great to write a story for Nick Cagnetti to be in my anthology, but then you have to go through the process of, hey, Nick Cagnetti,
Yeah.
would you do a story for my anthology? What was that afternoon like, you know?
It was several afternoons. Like I think I spent a week to 10 days crafting the perfect email to send to Nick. Like, and as I did with every one of these artists, like it's an incredibly like nerve-wracking experience to ask someone to collaborate with you, even if you know them and have never collaborated with them before. Like it's just like, talk about making yourself vulnerable. Like when you put yourself out there like that, it's really really terrifying. And it got a little less terrifying as I went. Like the first artist I contacted was Anna, who I knew from, she had done a variant cover for my one shot I made 4 years ago for Next Door. And so that was the scariest email, because I had really never contacted anyone in that capacity before to be like, let's make some art. Are you interested? But yeah, I mean, I did what I'd like. I went over the scripts meticulously, and I made sure that they all fit the artist's work. Like, not only did they fit what I perceived they'd be good at drawing, but like if I did anything well with this book, I think I really worked hard to try to figure out what these artists enjoyed drawing, like what they would really want to be part of. So like I offered a page rate in advance, and I had a script for them to see. But more than that, I just wanted to show them that like, I understand your work and I think you'd really enjoy this. Like, do you agree? Was kind of the pitch I made to all of them.
Yeah, like you know, the reason I ask is because it's something that I have pondered in the past as well. And you know, really, comics bookcase and you, Zach, the human being, are an inspiration to Lisa and I, because we see you doing it, you know, and the fact that you can make it happen suggests that others and possibly us could make it happen.
Like a great personal risk and financial risk, because we've talked to a lot of comic book creators, and if you're a writer, that initial investment a lot of times has to come from you. And like,
Oh yeah.
and I love that you are going with this first Kickstarter with a nearly finished product. Like, to me, as a person who invests in Kickstarters, like, that's super compelling. Like, well, the thing exists, so it just has to get to me. What was that particular decision like? Going like, okay, I am going to invest X amount of money to make this dream come true, regardless of if it works out or not.
So that was a slow decision. The money I really had to. It was basic. This is basically 3 years in the making of like saving the money and budgeting and getting the resources together like that. But yeah, it's like uh, I mean, like it's a reckless decision, right? So you have to have like conversations with your partner if they're not okay with it and on board and supporting you through it. Like uh, you know that's kind of irresponsible and selfish, right? Like if you don't have full family buy-in. So that was important to me. But yeah, otherwise it was just like the compulsion to eventually like make these comics was so strong, and I just felt so passionate about them that it started to make the like what I had to sacrifice monetarily start to feel worth it. And really, like I don't gauge the success of this book on whether or not I break even or like get any money back. It's more just like when this book is done and this campaign is done, am I in a place where I'm able to immediately start making more comics? Like that's the goal of it. So to come away with enough money recouped to start the next project, and also hopefully an audience where the second project to come out of this won't be as terrifying and financially risky as the first one. So it's kind of like I think of it like investing in a small business almost, like from a financial standpoint. But what you were saying about like being an inspiration, like I really appreciate that. And like I mean, I was thinking of people like Gail Simone and Matt Fraction who dabbled in comics journalism to various degrees before having. So I think there's sort of a lineage of it that like you can look to when you're like doing press, because there is like I don't know, I felt there are people who want you to kind of stay in your lane a little bit within comics. It's like, oh, you're press, don't you know, that's what you do. Like you don't like you all want to be review creators to an extent, you know, and you kind of just have to be like, yeah, I hear you, but I'm still gonna make stuff. Like,
Right.
Yeah. I think it goes back to how small comics is as a community versus other art forms. You know, like movies has like one Peter Bogdanovich, like one critic became a
yeah,
filmmaker, and like
right,
that's it. But in comics, I think there's there are more paths to creation, and because comics, like it doesn't take much to create. Like
right.
it's still a financial burden, and I'm sure it was a serious conversation with your partner to make this a reality. But it's less so than like, okay, well, I'm going to go make a movie.
Yeah, and there's just something. It's like it's a medium that calls for participation to an extent, and I think
Yes.
always has. Like there's a long history of that. Like it part of it is that accessibility. Like and I do think like yeah, while there are some people who want you to stay in your lane as a reviewer or press or whatever, there's so many more who are really excited for you to start creating, and you find them, and their encouragement is like absolutely vital to doing this. And there's people who know you from your interviews who I guarantee you right now are like wondering what would a comic that Lisa and Brad made be like there's actively an audience just because of how good you all are at podcasting and sharing your excitement for comics. Like there are people who will reciprocate that right now and are ready to do that.
Well, let's take a
Don't
moment.
tell us that. Don't tell us that.
Yeah. Sorry for your budget, but yeah, that's true.
I still want to take a moment, Lisa, and eat those words of affirmation.
I refuse.
No.
Yeah, that is a healthy thing to do. I'm like, I refuse compliments. I'm not open today.
I am curious, Zach. You have gone the Kickstarter route before with Next Door, and we get a Next Door sequel in the Death of Comics Bookcase. But what did you learn through your first Kickstarter trip that you have then applied to this current one?
Oh, so much. Like I was not prepared whatsoever for my first Kickstarter. Like I remember doing that campaign, we had a variant cover for it that Anna did that was actually like created the second week of the campaign or something ridiculous like that. Like because we were like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had a variant in the middle of the campaign? So the preparation for that one was just nothing. Like it was like just jumping into the pool and not knowing how to swim is basically what I did with that Kickstarter. So with this one, I mean, like I've been working on this for over a year. Like I started writing the first stories in this last February and started assembling like the assets and stuff midway through last year. And like I was really happy, Lisa, to hear you say that. Like it's exciting that it's done already, because I wanted it to be done already just because it's so much simpler on your end as a Kickstarter creator to have it all finished and be able to tell people definitively when it is and not have to stress about that at the same time as you're promoting it. So that was a big lesson. And I just thought I could like something like, I love Kickstarter. I love how accessible it is to me, but I like something that bothers me about like marketing a, there's just something that personally bothered me about marketing a project that wasn't finished yet to some extent. Like I was telling people, this is going to be great, give me your money. But like, I didn't know, like, I thought it was going to be great, but it wasn't done. Like, you know, so this time I just thought I could like talk about it so much more excitedly if I had personally finished it and read the book, and it would just be a better way to operate it. And luckily I'm in a place with my life where I was able to like spend the time ahead to save the money and like have the book made in advance. But there is a little bit of concern that's like, are there some people who like really like helping bring the project to life and like will be like, well, this is done, why does it need me? I hope not. But
I don't like, I personally don't think that, as somebody who has been burned by projects in the
right,
past.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
I'm the exact opposite. I'm like Lisa, and I think also when you then do go out and you want to promote the experience and the way that you've done it so expertly so far, by teasing it a little bit here, getting everyone ready for the launch, you know, you're able to give Lisa and myself a copy to read. We read it, we get excited about it. That excitement spreads. And I think if you don't have a product before a Kickstarter launch, then you know that's harder to do. And it's just it's more imaginary. Like it just doesn't
yeah,
feel like a
Yeah,
possibility.
I think I mean our temperament, like I want to buy something. I don't necessarily
yeah,
want to invest in something. I'd much rather just like, I know I'm getting a thing, and maybe if things go well, I also get a t-shirt. You know what I mean? Like that is what I'm on
yeah.
Kickstarter for.
I'm really that makes me feel better to hear you say that. Yeah, because that was a concern I had. But I wanted to look at it as like more of a traditional comics pre-order
Yeah,
system. Like, and I'm able to give people within a pretty good idea, like the exact time when they will get their physical comic. I mean, they'll get the PDF within a week of this thing. Like we'll basically put the thank yous in and it's ready to go, you know.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Zach, is there anything that we haven't touched upon that you would want to touch upon before we wrap things up?
I just want to give a shout out to every one of these artists who were game to take this plunge with me, a relatively inexperienced Kickstarter creator, because they are, I mean, these are established artists for the most part. Like,
Yeah.
and they were like Ryan. Let's start with Ryan. I'm gonna go through this quickly. I
We
won't take up
love
No,
too
do
much
it.
the
time.
art for the interstitials. It's
But
legitimately so funny and so fun.
and if you want to talk about terrifying, trying to explain to another human being that I want you to help me kill my anthropomorphic personification of a comics blog in a 7-page interstitial form, like this is what I'm asking you to do with a month of your life, that's terrifying. Like I was like, I don't know what other person on the planet will like grasp the humor and the just the whole concept of these interstitials. And Ryan like read the script and wrote me back like, I really, all caps, want to draw this. And I was like, all right, like that. So he was great about that. PJ was just incredible. Like finished his, like I think drew it in less time than it took me to write it, which was amazing. Like, and he was sending me like hourly updates, like, here, what do you think of this page, like in real time? And I was just like, this guy working all night, like what's going on here? Luke Horsman, who drew the fantasy one, hilarious. Like his designs still make me laugh. Nick, we've already talked about. And Anna, like I said, Anna Readman, who drew the Werewolf Priest, I think she's 5 years from now, she's not a comic superstar. I'll be absolutely shocked. So.
Don't forget Next Door.
Next story, yeah, my good friend Pat Skott, who like we've been buddies for like 5 or 6 years, and that's a little different. Like I didn't have to send a scary email to him because we're pals, like personally.
I just had a question bubble up
Do it.
in my brain. Like now that you've done, do you think you're going to stay in the vein of doing comedy comics, or do you have something a little bit more earnest a brewing in your imagination?
Yeah, so I don't think like I didn't set out with any of these to be like I'm going to write something funny today, but like I just spent so much time with every one of these scripts that it got hard at a certain point not to crack jokes. Like when you're on the like week 8 of writing an 8-page story, like you're kind of getting a little delirious with it. But yeah, I mean I don't like right now I'm writing the full series scripts for the series of the Werewolf Priest would be. Like that's the one I really want to develop into a series. And so yeah, I'm gonna spend this year talking to more editors about it, finishing the writing for it. And it's not as funny, like that's a little darker because it's about like really the death of the local news. Like there's werewolves and ghosts and things in it, but it's really about what's happening to our media right now. And so I think that one's a little less inherently funny, and that's what I'm working on now. And hopefully we'll have news about it at some point and it'll go somewhere great and we'll be like, can you believe it was in this goofy Death of Comics Bookcase thing way back when? Like
I'm excited to read it.
I'm super excited
I
about it.
find it super compelling.
And like the news angle absolutely speaks to Lisa and myself. And the final panel of that story is one of the best final panels I've read all year. I loved it so much.
Yeah, the bookcase had to reference it on the next page too. Like he couldn't.
Yeah, he couldn't let it sit there.
No, he had to make sure they got the joke. So.
Oh man! So the Death of Comics Bookcase Kickstarter is currently up and running as of this published episode, and I would encourage everyone to click on the link in the show notes and to also check out Zack's video, because you can get to that video and you can pinch and zoom on all his comics bookcases behind him. You can see the comics bookcases of Comics Bookcase.
It's not that scary.
No, it's day. I filmed it in the daytime, so the bookcase is passive.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's like a
secret.
Toy Story situation.
Yeah, or like Aliens, like they only come at night, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
Bookcase.
Zack, thank you so much for hanging out and talking with us. Like we said, you know, we find what you do incredibly inspiring, and we wish you the best of luck. And we also know that we don't need to wish you too much luck because you're killing it.
Thank you both. Like I said, you're the first ones I reached out to promote this because I love your show, and Lisa was such an important part of Comics Bookcase back in the day. So this was really special. Thank you so much for doing this.
And there you have it, our conversation with Zack Quaintance about the Death of Comics Bookcase.
The literal best.
But it seems to me that Comics Bookcase is not dead, far from it. We've got at least 2 volumes, depending on the success of this one.
I think it's successfully undead.
Yeah.
And undead is very in.
It's just new. It's something different. Change is not only good, it is necessary for our survival. We always get off on watching people make comics,
We
right?
get off?
We get off.
We get off on it.
It is highly motivating to watch someone figure out the finances and figure out the logistics of how they are going to make comics, and then they go and make comics. And it's even more motivating when it's one of your friends, because if it's one of your friends doing it, it means you can do it. It means, honestly, anyone can make comics. So let's go make some comics.
I do think that Zack is extraordinary, though.
That is psychotic, Lisa. That's where you went with.
You clearly don't have siblings.
Well, I mean, maybe that is true. Maybe that is true. I was not trying to take away from any extraordinariness that Zack contains. Obviously, I believe it's extraordinary that he got this thing done, but also the fact that I know somebody who's a little bit extraordinary. Well, no, now you're making me sound like a real jackass.
I do think, it is weird to think that I know a person who's done every cool job. You know what I mean? Just by doing what we do through podcasting, it's we've met artists, we've met writers, we've met novelists, we've met actors, we've met directors. Any cool job just some boob like Zack Quaintance is doing it right now,
Yeah.
and that could be you.
And I think like when you're growing up and you're starting to discover your passions for the arts, and when that happens, you find your favorite artists, you immediately idolize them and put them on this pedestal, like Stephen King or Steven Spielberg or Van Gogh or whatever. But when you interview like enough people, you realize that this is obtainable. Like your dreams are more attainable than you think, and that's what I would tell my younger self. You can love these people, you can idolize these people, but they just did the thing, and you can do the thing.
Yeah, do the thing. I say do the thing, but like I'm like one of those people who is incredibly intimidated by steps, where I do in some like arrogant part of my brain go like, I could totally make a comic, and then somebody goes, great, here are the steps to make a comic, and then once I see all of the steps, I go like, oh no, I don't think I can make a comic.
Sure.
Why even bother starting? But I'm particularly inspired by what Zack said about like being a good literary citizen first. Him starting Comics Bookcase and talking to creators and asking them how they got their books made, or how they, fostered their little baby ideas until they grew up into this big, beautiful thing.
Yeah, basically just diving into comics, surrounding himself with comics, absorbing all that. And I feel like that's sort of what we're doing. Like his journey might, and I'm just saying this might because we don't know if we're actually going to try to make comics, but it might be parallel to what Comic Book Couples Counseling is doing. Although I'm not ready to kill Comic Book Couples Counseling.
No, I don't like, no matter what we do, I want to do Comic Book Couples Counseling like forever.
Right. That's how I feel.
To me, if all we ever do is be a good literary citizen for comics, like that in and of itself is like extremely satisfying to me.
Yeah.
And actually, thanks to Will Hoffnecht and 100% Comics, if you Google me, which I've done many times, that's the only thing I use private mode for. I don't know what you guys use it for. But if you Google me, comic book creator does come up because of Batman Year Wah.
Yeah.
Yay, I am a comic book creator.
That's right.
I made one thing.
No, you made two things. Because don't forget about Weapon Ek.
But that one has slightly less good, what is it called? Like when
SEO.
Yeah.
And I think like this is another like opportunity to just like highlight why comics is great through its tininess, right? Through its small community. There is so much access to doing the thing, to understanding the thing. And once you touch a little bit of its magic, like you said, you want to partake in that magic.
Yeah, that goes back to our Tyler Crook conversation, talking about Lonesome Hunters. And the idea of like, in his books, the world is surrounded by magic, but not everybody knows about it. But the people who know about it have a greater likelihood to be touched by it. You know what I mean? Like, so with comics are literally everywhere. From the second that someone could pick up a stick and draw in the dirt, comics has existed. But so many people don't even think about it. They don't even think like that meme that they're laughing at, that's a comic. That book, that children's book that they're reading to their kid, that's a comic.
Absolutely.
But people who see the ubiquity of this art form love it so much, and before you know it, they're touched by that magic. And oh my goodness, I'm so magical.
And on that lovely note, Lisa, I think we need to bring this episode to a close. Next week's Comic Book Couples Counseling will be a creator conversation with Jesse Lonergan and Pornsack Pishashot talking about their new Boom Studios comic, Man's Best.
Which is great, and this conversation is great.
The first issue is already out. Be sure to read that before checking out next week's episode. After that, we will have another conversation with our buddy Daniel Warren Johnson talking about the conclusion of his first Transformers arc, just as he's preparing to launch the second arc. And Schema, we gotta get to it. We're talking Avengers versus X-Men, talking the romance between Scott Summers and Emma Frost, and I'm really dying, and I know a lot of you are irritated that we haven't gotten to that counseling session yet, but it is happening very, very soon. This time, we promise. I am back from WonderCon. We're going to get it done before C2E2.
And speaking of C2E2, the next CBCC panel will be at that thing on Friday at 3:45 in room S405B. I said that very weird.
What room again, Lisa?
S405-B.
Yeah, very
B
excited
for Brad.
to do the next Comic Book Couples Counseling panel. And then on the 21st of April, we will be screening Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze at the Alamo Draft House in Winchester, Virginia. And we may have a really rad virtual introduction for that one. Link in the show notes to those tickets. They are going quickly, but there are still a few seats left that are not in the front row, but you're going to want to get them now, because the front row, it's not the best place to be.
But it's better than not being there at all.
Sure.
And on Patreon, we are still sleepwalking through Sandman. We literally just wrapped up Sandman Endless Nights, and we are about to go into Sandman Overture. Okay, Brad, we better get out of here because the rain stopped and I have destroyed all of our furniture.
Oh, boy.
Where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
You can find me on most social medias at MouthDork. If you have some words of affirmation for our logo, you can send them to Aaron Prescott at A Cool Hand Fluke. And if you have some words of affirmation for our radical banner art and show poster, send them to Karen Chapp at Karen_X-Men fan. Lisa, where can our listeners send their words of affirmation to you?
I'm always accepting words of affirmation at Sidewalk Siren on Instagram and Twitter. If you'd like to spend more quality time with us, you can subscribe to us on Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, Apple Podcasts, or whatever app you prefer. We're everywhere. If you'd like to get exclusive, you can join our Patreon, where you'll get more content, including weekly bonus episodes.
If you'd like to reach out and touch us electronically, you can email the podcast, cbccpodcast@gmail.com. You can visit our website, comicbookcouplescounseling.com, or follow us on all the socials at CBCC Podcast.
You can give us the gift of 5 stars on Audible or Apple Podcasts, and if you'd like to do an act of service, why not write a review of the show while you're there?
Yes, please.
We're fluent and receptive in all 5 love languages. It really warms our hearts and helps the pod.
So until next time, friends, keep your love tank full.
And your psychic rapport...
Open?
Yeah.
Doopy doopy. Bum bum ba da bum bum ba da ba.